So I don't share the concerns of some of my fellow councillors about this pot of money that's sitting there. And look, we've been told, and it's absolutely true, for any of us who invest in the market, they will know that the market goes up and down. And I don't see a Warren Buffett amongst us here who can help us to make sure that we build up an even bigger pot. So look, I'm quite comfortable with this, and I will support it.
Thank you. Warren Buffett or Donald Trump, maybe.
Councillor Darby.
Thanks, Chair. It does seem like just last week or a couple of weeks ago that we first started considering this, but as Councillor Cashmore reminded us, it was 15 months ago, probably at least.
Absolutely.
And we have had a couple of workshops on this, and one of the early workshops members, I was quite concerned about this suggestion. I think we've all probably asked hard questions about this fund, and so we should. And we've interrogated it well, and during that time, as we've journeyed through that discussion, one of the things that came out was really our insurance was not going to cover us fully, and that's why we asked the staff to explore further, and they've come forward with the concept of establishing a self-insurer, a captive insurance entity, and that will come back to us, I understand. Ms Tyndall's bringing that to us. And that's alleviated a lot of my concern, because I think that cover, I need absolute confidence that this city is covered in an emergency. And you never know when that's going to be, and hopefully it never strikes us as we sit around this table. But as other cities have had to confront emergencies and not have such an insurance package or insurer, we're all out of pocket. And it can set the economy of a city back years. Look at Christchurch, for example. Yep. It took them 4.5 years to negotiate with their insurers. Look, this is a fund that is a low yield fund. There's no question that this is low yield, and it's low yield because
Nonsense.
it is a low yield fund because you need to access it.
Nonsense.
Thank you.
Look, please take your speaking turn later, Councillor, but it is a low yield fund because you need to access it. If it was a high yield fund, you'd bury it away and wrap it up and make sure you secured a high yield, but that's not how it is. This is not high yield airport shares, which I'm glad to see not on the table. And it is a fund that I think that we do need to draw down on. And it's not as if we haven't been drawing down on it. I think some might be of the opinion that this is brand new. We have drawn down on this. We're drawing down extra on it, and it's an extra, I think it's an extra 76 million approximately, and that will probably look like about an extra 90 next year, something like that. I'm just guessing those numbers, because of the base amount is being reduced. And it's definitely not there's no question here that we're offloading a core strategic asset as identified in our community engagement plan, which we signed up to about 18 months ago. It is not identified there. If we, as a council, thought that it was, we should have identified it then. We did not, and I thought we canvassed all those categories pretty well. So it has my support after not having my support at workshops prior. And I hope those that are around the table that have been regular chanters of bring down debt and bring down rate strike, and of course there's a bit of rates that services that level of debt that we bring it down from. I hope people that have chanted that pretty rigorously in the past can lend their chant to support this decision today.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Darby. Councillor Clough.
Yeah, no, I'll be quite brief. Look, I can totally understand where Councillor Crum and others are coming from. It would be best if we didn't have to utilise this stage and be a bit more measured and and it would have been great if we could have held this through to the long-term plan. But the bottom line is the city's just growing 40 or 50,000 people a year, and we're getting these huge escalations on land pricing, and transport haven't come to us frivolously. They've come to us and say, whoa, wait a minute, now the government's freeing up land and we may have to be looking at buying some of that because they're going to sell it to the highest bidder and we may need it, e.g. Waterview, for example, but we know that's going to be on hold for a little while. But so we're just in a bit of a squeeze here, and it's not to pay off debt, but it's to avoid further debt, and we need to keep those Standard & Poor's measures. We need to keep the credit rating up because that does affect the interest rates when we go to renegotiate loans, and then we're just shooting ourselves in the foot if we end up paying more in interest, and when we're better to put the money into some transport projects if needed, as required, and done astutely by our management team. So
Thank you, Ross. Councillor Lee, and then I'm going to put it.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, this is a sad day for me, but there's no room for sentiment and politics. It's disappointing, though, that the dire warnings that Auckland Council Investment Limited gave us, some of us some time ago, are coming to fruition. They felt that in terms of process, putting this the Diversified Assets Fund into the hands of the Council Treasury, which has been an expert borrower, was not a good process at all, and they strongly opposed the transfer of the DFA to this council. Essentially within months, council management, all of them, recommending that the money be spent in tranches of 100 million. Initially by a officer, which is probably the world record in officer delegation, but now, thanks to an amendment, Madam Chair, you're in there as well. But I have to say, to be honest with you, I'm not that comforted by that either. We've had two stories here, and council managers have alluded to the debt ceiling and losing the AA rating and scary stuff like that. And then when members start taking that seriously, like Councillor Crum, then say, well, no, we don't want you to be too worried about that. So there's always been, for many years now, council borrowing and council officers all around the world borrowing from here and there and everywhere. That's all fine. That, as who said, Councillor Quacks of all people said, we've got a lazy balance sheet. Ooh, really? I can't accept that one. But anyway, everything is okay, and now after we've got the DFA, things are not okay really, and we want to get our hands on that money, and it's to prudently manage debt. But so the average person would think, oh, they're going to pay down debt. No, they're not going to do that at all. They're going to spend old-fashioned spending other people's money. And so my concern is that we seem to be lurching almost in a schizophrenic way from spending a whole lot of money, and I won't go into the Auckland transport thing, but we're going from drunken sailor mode to Mr. Scrooge all within minutes, and it's somebody talked about conflating discussions. Well, it's kind of hard to avoid that. But this morning we dealt with the interim transport levy, and people had strong views on that. But the interim transport levy, if you remember, arose because all our work, and we spent a lot of money on an alternative funding source, came to a dead end because our preferred alternative funding, which was motorway charges, was found to be illegal and it didn't have any political support. So at the last minute we had the so-called transport levy, and we put that on the same amount of people who actually, the same people who pay the rates, and they would have been the same people who would have paid the motorway charges. So, but here we're talking in terms of the diversified fund assets, we're talking about a genuinely alternative stream of funding that comes from offshore, not from the poor old Auckland ratepayers or residents or user charges. It is our export industry, if you like, and the Mayor's going to be going to a transport summit and some of the members hobnobbing with business people. This is our export business, and it's earned up to 18% a year in recent years, on an average 9%, and somebody said, one of the managers said, oh, we're better off putting it in a bank account. And are you really telling me you're going to get 9% from a bank account right now? So I have to say I'm not confident with the advice we're getting. I have to contrast it with the advice I get from experts, financial experts, people who have been in Auckland Council Investments Limited and are still considered financial experts by the government. But their advice is totally different. Their advice is saying, if you really are in a hole because you've borrowed too much, then the first thing you do is look at your costs. That's what prudent financial management would be. And so, what are our costs? We've got our list of capex, 1.9 million, and we've got somewhere in here is OPEX, and no breakdown whatsoever. And so the key element of a 5.6 billion annual plan, we have no transparency at all.
Point of order, speaking to relevancy
Now,
when we're talking
thank you.
about
Sorry?
this. We're straying to the LGP now.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Who wrote that?
No transparency at all on this decision.
Okay.
And in terms of OPEX, how long ago was it that the staff salaries blew out by $70 million in one financial year? That was the last kind of...
Relevancy, thank you.
So I think in terms of if we are getting towards our limits, then we need to look at our costs first. Now, okay, let's say we've got all our costs under control, including Auckland Transport. So we have to sell assets.
I need to make sure that
Now,
happens.
in terms of our credit worthiness and debt ratios and asset to debt ratios and all the rest of it, this is one set of assets that's an earner. Not only and earns offshore. And so wouldn't you look at this, the last, because it is drawn down every year on an average of $24 million a year, and that can go on forever. If we drew down less and invested more, we would build up that fund more. Now, because we live in a capitalist world, sometimes the market goes up and sometimes it goes down, and Councillor Quacks would be the first one to defend the market to go up and down as it wishes. However, overall, this has performed ahead of all predictions at 9%. And
Thank you, Councillor Lee.
no,
Can you wind
could I
up?
have an extension,
I'll move
please?
an extension.
Councillor Lee.
Seconded. It's been seconded.
Seconded.
Kathy,
long?
I just want to say that if we're really concerned about our debt profile, selling the DFA will actually undermine our credit worthiness, because we're going to go on spending without the underpinning of that investment. And I'll tell you this now, Councillor Casey is quite right. This is the start of the sale of the other assets. Have no doubt about it. And in terms of intergenerational equity that Councillor Holst was talking about, we are betraying the future. We are spending
point of
the
order.
birthright
Yes,
of future, we are spending the birthright of future
Thank you,
Aucklanders.
councillor Lee. There's been a point of order.
Because they won't be able to
Madam
afford to live here.
Chair,